Monopolistic competition is a market structure characterized by many firms selling differentiated products in an industry in which there is free entry and exit. An oligopoly is a market structure characterized by a few firms selling the same product with limited entry of other firms. This figure identifies the four different types of market structure and summarizes the similarities and differences between them. In the figure, monopoly and competition are the two extremes, while oligopoly and monopolistic competition are in between them. Product differentiation is the effort by firms to produce goods that are slightly different from other types of goods. Homogeneous products are goods that have no product differentiation, goods that are indistinguishably similar from the point of view of the buyer. Heterogeneous products are goods that have product differentiation, or goods that are not similar in the view of the buyer. This table illustrates the wide variety of different types of goods in the market. One interesting fact to note from the table is that even bottled water has 50 different brands. How can companies manage to make 50 different brands of bottled water and try to make their brand differentiated? David Ogilvy's advertising for Shell in the 1950s is probably the best example of differentiating a homogeneous product. Shell's successful marketing campaign, the new Shell with Platform It, moved Shell into the big leagues in gasoline manufacturing. Platform It, however, was an additive found in all gasoline back then. It was not even possible to buy gasoline without Platform It. When countries trade with each other, trade may be for goods that are from different industries, inter-industry trade, or it may be goods from similar industries, intra-industry trade. Product differentiation can explain why countries conduct inter-industry and intra-industry trade. Intra-industry trade is trade between countries for goods from the same or similar industries. For example, the United States buys Toyotas from Japan and sells Fords to Japan. Inter-industry trade is trade between countries for goods from different industries. For example, the US buys Toyotas from Japan and sells computers to Japan. Product differentiation leads to advertising. If a firm has a new differentiated product, then the only way to let everyone know more about the product is through advertising. Advertising sometimes leads to product differentiation by creating a perception that a product is different. There are four major ways to differentiate products. 1. Altering a product's physical characteristics, such as making the legroom in a car longer or making a knife sharper. 2. Location. A McDonald's restaurant 10 miles away has the same menu and the same product as the one down the street. However, the location makes it more likely for you to buy from the nearer one. 3. Time. A flight from Los Angeles to New York that leaves at 10 a.m. is a different product than one that leaves at 6 a.m. And 4. Convenience. Your local supermarket sells mushrooms that are whole and mushrooms that are sliced. These products are no longer the same and are sold for different prices. Since product differentiation entails cost, finding the optimal level of product differentiation is similar to finding the equilibrium in a supply and demand model. This figure illustrates how firms determine the optimal amount of product differentiation. In this figure, the optimal amount of product differentiation is found by comparing the additional revenue from product differentiation with the additional cost of product differentiation. A firm will choose to increase the amount of product differentiation until the point where the additional revenue from differentiation equals the additional cost. While it is easy to model the optimal amount of product differentiation, applying the model in reality may be difficult because revenue gains are difficult to judge. How much more a firm makes from product differentiation is also affected by the firm's actions of other firms. Recall, monopolistic competition is a market structure characterized by many firms selling differentiated products in an industry in which there is free entry and free exit. Since monopolistically competitive firms sell a differentiated product, their demand curves slope downward, similar to a monopoly. However, unlike a monopoly, the monopolistic firm faces competition, as other firms are free to enter and free to exit the industry. This figure illustrates the key features of the model of monopolistic competition. The top left graph shows a typical monopolistically competitive firm that is generating positive profits, while the graph on the top right shows one with negative profits. The bottom graph shows a monopolistically competitive firm with zero profits. This figure showcases some similarities between a monopolistically competitive firm and a monopoly. 1. The demand curve and the marginal cost curves that they are facing are downward sloping. 2. The profit maximization requires that the quantity be determined at the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost. 3. Profits of both firms can be positive and negative in the short run. Differences between a monopolistically competitive firm and a monopoly are twofold. Number 1, the demand curve faced by the monopolistically competitive firm is not the market demand curve. And 2, in the long run, a monopolistically competitive firm will earn zero economic profits as a result of free entry and free exit. Hence, while any of the three graphs in this figure may depict a monopolistically competitive firm in the short run, only the bottom graph is consistent with the profits of the firm in the long run. Why does entry and exit result to zero profits in the long run? When positive profits are made, new firms enter the industry, taking some of the demand from existing firms and watering down each firm's profits. When negative profits are made, some firms exit the industry, increasing the demand for remaining firms and raising each firm's profits to zero. Comparing the long-run equilibrium of a competitive and a monopolistically competitive market, we identify two differences. 1. Price is greater than marginal cost in a monopolistically competitive firm because the firm restricts output below the competitive equilibrium. 2. The firm could lower excess cost and eliminate excess capacity if it increased production. Excess costs are costs of production that are higher than the minimum average total cost. Excess capacity is a situation in which a firm produces below the level that gives the minimum average total cost, the minimum efficient scale. This figure illustrates excess cost and excess capacity brought about with monopolistic competition in the long run. As stated earlier, the monopolistically competitive firm earns zero profits in the long run. This is illustrated with the long-run average total cost tangent to the demand curve at the profit maximizing quantity. In this figure, excess cost is shown as the distance between the monopolistically competitive price and the minimum of the average total cost. Excess capacity is shown as the distance between the monopolistically competitive quantity produced and the quantity consistent with the minimum efficient scale. This table compares the different effects of competition, monopoly, and monopolistic competition with regards to price, deadweight loss generated, profits in the long run, and the ability to minimize average total cost. From this table, we can see that a monopoly and a monopolistically competitive firm are similar, except in the ability to generate profits in the long run. A competitive firm and a monopolistically competitive firm's similarity is that both have zero profits in the long run. Recall, oligopoly is a market structure characterized by few firms selling the same product with limited entry of other firms. Because there are only a few firms in the industry, firm managers need to understand the situation within their own firm and those of other firms. This awareness and consideration of other firms' reactions is called strategic behavior. Strategic behavior is firm behavior that takes into account the market power and reactions of other firms in the industry. One common approach to understanding strategic behavior is through game theory. Game theory is a branch of applied mathematics that studies games of strategy like poker or chess. Game theory has many uses in economics, including the analysis of the interaction of firms that take each other's actions into account. One example in game theory is the game called Prisoner's Dilemma. Prisoner's Dilemma game is a game in which individual incentives lead to a non-optimal or non-cooperative outcome. If players can credibly commit to cooperate, they can achieve the best cooperative outcome. The game is between Anna and Pete, two prisoners arrested for a crime that they committed. The police already have enough evidence to get a conviction for a lesser crime, one that would yield a prison sentence of 3 years each for Anna and Pete. Anna and Pete have the option to confess or remain silent to the more serious crime. The reward for confessing when the other does not is a reduced penalty of 1 year, which is not as severe as the 3 years they would get for the lesser crime. The penalty of conviction without a confession is 7 years. Both Anna and Pete will get 5 years each if both confess. This figure illustrates the payoff matrix for the Prisoner's Dilemma game. A payoff matrix is a table that contains the strategies and payoffs for two players in a game. In the payoff matrix, the case where both remain silent is the cooperative outcome. The case where both choose to follow individual incentives is the non-cooperative outcome. Notice that the cooperative outcome is more preferred, with less prison time, than the non-cooperative outcome. Unfortunately, Pete and Anne will find themselves in the case where both confess, the non-cooperative outcome. Mathematician and Nobel laureate in economics John Nash defined the non-cooperative outcome, the non-cooperative equilibrium, or aka the Nash equilibrium, as a set of strategies that no player would deviate from unilaterally. In the Nash equilibrium, no player would see an increase in their payoff by changing their strategy when the other keeps their strategy constant. In the case of the two prisoners, Anna and Pete would be better off with the cooperative behavior. However, the payoffs of each prisoner is always higher when each chooses to confess. One simple application of the Prisoner's Dilemma is with duopoly games. Duopoly is when there are two firms in the market. Duopolies, like the one illustrated in this figure, can increase profits when they cooperate and decrease the quantities that they sell. Unfortunately, the lure of higher profits achieved by increasing output once the other player commits to a lower output can result to the non-cooperative outcome. In this figure, the non-cooperative outcome is when both Jack and Jill sell 60 pumpkins each, and their profits both equal 0. While firms can compete by varying quantities, they can also compete through pricing. In economics, Cournot competition, named after French economist Augustin Cournot, is the competition in quantities, while the Bertrand competition, named after Joseph Louis Francois Bertrand, a French mathematician, is the competition in prices. Explicit collusion is open cooperation of firms to make mutually beneficial pricing of production decisions. In explicit collusion, managers communicate directly with each other and agree to fix prices or cut back production. Explicit collusion in the United States is illegal. A cartel is a group of producers in the same industry who coordinate pricing and production decisions. An example of a cartel is OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Tacit collusion is an implicit or unstated cooperation of firms to make mutually beneficial pricing and production decisions. The dominant firm in a tacit collusion is the price leader. A price leader is the price-setting firm in a collusive industry that other firms follow. Although the prisoner's dilemma and the Corneau duopoly suggest that there is a tendency for a non-cooperative outcome, there is an incentive to cooperate if the game is to be repeated over a long period of time. Anne and Pete may cooperate if the payoffs involve small monetary rewards instead of jail time, and the game can be played again in the future. The incentive to cheat to an agreement will depend on the likelihood of detection. For example, OPEC member nations may choose not to honor its quota if it can secretly sell oil to other countries, such as China, for example. Once a country chooses to cheat or defect, its profits will increase at the expense of lower profits for all other member nations.